A new filing today in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial, and it just so happens to contain the former president's long list of past legal troubles, not all the way back to the 70s, but more recent ones. It's a standard move in New York state trials. It says if the defendant chooses to testify, prosecutors can bring up any past misconduct and criminal acts, but they have to let him know, and today's the day. Remarkably, the former president has a few of them, including being forced to pay for falsifying business records, forced to pay damages for defamation against E. Jean Carroll, forced to pay fees for a bad faith lawsuit against Hillary Clinton. The judge in this case will now have to decide which, if any, of these are relevant enough to be brought up before a jury. With us now, former Trump attorney Tim Parlatore. And we should point out, Tim, this only comes if they need it, in the view of the prosecutors, to undermine the president's credibility. Right. And only if he chooses to testify. Do you think he's going to ultimately testify?
I don't think he will, but litigating a motion like this is a very important factor in making that determination, and that's why it has to be done at the beginning of the trial. And so you want to really have an idea of what is and is not out of bounds before you make that decision. But honestly, I don't think that he should or will testify in this case, because I don't think that he has anything to add. It's an unnecessary risk.
So let's talk about some of these issues that will come up in what's called in New York a Sandoval hearing. Yep. Do you think that it is relevant, and we had some other lawyers talking about this, the Letitia James case, Attorney General Letitia James, saying that Donald Trump falsified business records, and the judge ordered $355 million or whatever it was, some unbelievable fee. I can't even wrap my brain around it. The argument would be it goes to credibility. If he has been adjudicated as not being honest and fined accordingly, that's relevant.
Correct. I do think that one's going to be problematic for them, because it is something that's currently being contested on appeal, and it is also something that is so closely paralleling this, where it's a falsifying business records, that it could be one of those things that they will find is more prejudicial than probative. And so I think a judge probably would disallow that, but it is certainly something that I would have expected them to raise.
So this week, both the prosecution and the defense and the judge are focused on jury selection. They've already seated 7 jurors.
They have.
Are you surprised with how quickly it's going?
I am. I thought the jury selection was going to take a lot longer, and the fact that they're already at 7, I mean, they're going to finish by the end of the week.
And what do you think the defense is doing right now in terms of preparing for tomorrow, when they're going to be interviewing more of the potential hundreds that could be picked to fill the remaining, I guess, 5 jurors and 6 alternates, 11 spots?
Well, they're definitely focusing on the past social media behavior of these potential jurors. It was something that they used quite effectively in the first day, of showing how certain people have made posts years ago in some cases that would be something that would be basis for a challenge for cause. So I think that they're primarily focusing on anything they can figure out in the backgrounds or social media activities of the people that they're going to be dealing with tomorrow.
So Trump's team has been concerned about finding an impartial jury in Manhattan, which is heavily Democratic, obviously. We went through some of the jurors that have been picked so far. One's a corporate lawyer, one's a civil litigator.
Very unusual to have that many lawyers on a jury.
Yeah, well, first of all, what do you think? Is that good or bad to have lawyers on the jury?
Depends on the case. I've never had one, but yeah, it certainly depends on the case. If you're trying to mount a technical defense and have them really stick to what the law is, then having an attorney on the jury can be a very good thing.
Yeah.
So,
but lawyers I've had on my panels, if I ever say to them, like, well, what do you say, to people who think that this is just a pissy little charge? You're taking a misdemeanor and adding another misdemeanor, morphing it into a felony, and you're treating, people say no one other than Trump would be treated that way. And there are lawyers who say that's not true. And like they get, not Trump-hating lawyers, just people say, no, this is exactly the kind of thing that district attorneys bring. Right. So it also could work the other way, I think.
I've tried cases like that in Manhattan before, where misdemeanors were turned into felonies. And so, yes, it is something that happens. And I think having lawyers on the jury that can, again, depending on which way they vote, the problem with having a lawyer on the jury is that they can be a very strong voice and influence the rest of the panel. And so if they are, strong to one side or the other, then that can sway everybody else on the panel.
What do you make of what happened yesterday? Trump was apparently making eye contact with potential jurors. He was admonished by Judge Merchan for muttering while one of them was being questioned. Judge Merchan said, I won't have potential jurors intimidated. What did you make of that? And did you have flashbacks about how difficult it was to tell Donald Trump what to do?
You know, making eye contact with jurors is not a bad thing. You know, it's certainly something that I do. It's something that, you know, if a juror...
But you do it like with your eyes wide open. You're all being sympathetic and likable. It sounds like there was some glowering going on, maybe.
That certainly does sound like that. And also, what did he mutter? You know, that could be problematic.
Yeah.
You know, whatever he muttered. But I think that, you know, the judge, you know, certainly cut it off. And you know, as I understand it, that juror was not seated anyway.
Tim Parlatore, thank you so much. Always good to have you on.